Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Night Terrors, Volume 4, Story Number 1. The night hung heavy, cold, dark, and silent. It stood frozen in the underbelly of Denver, tucked into a jagged alley behind a derelict bar in Colfax. I was diving for treasure, aluminum and glass, the currency of the displaced. The meager returns from these bins funded my winter's survival. While the holidays occasionally brought out the generosity of strangers, the biting wind made panhandling an agonizing chore. I operated in a gray area. The night crew allowed my presence as long as I remained a ghost. The heavy back door groaned open just as I exited a dumpster. Silas, the bouncer, emerged, hauling a man in a filthy black suit. He tossed the stranger into the slush-packed alley like a bag of refuse. The man moaned, then crawled toward the shadows of the trash bin. Silas lit 2 cigarettes and passed one to me. "What's his story?" I asked, watching the burly one-shoot man retch. "Did he pick a fight?" Silas shook his head, exhaling a plume of smoke. "No, he wouldn't stop shouting about cover-ups, government plots, signals from deep space, underground installations, black goo, the usual madness. He claimed he was a genetically engineered operative with top-secret clearance. We realized he wasn't just intoxicated, he was completely unhinged." "He wears a black suit," I noted, watching the man stare blankly at the brick wall. "Maybe he's with the men in black." Silas laughed until he choked, but I remained solemn. "You never know," I added. "I served in the army," the man suddenly rasped, his eyes fixed on the wall. "Special forces." Silas raised a mocking eyebrow. "Is that where you watched everyone die?" The man looked up, his gaze piercing. "Everyone dies. You can't save anyone. I can't save anyone." Silas gave the man 10 minutes to vanish before he called the police. Once Silas disappeared back inside, I knelt beside the stranger. "Were you really Special Forces?" I asked. "You smell like garbage," he replied, though a boyish smirk flickered on his face. He looked exhausted. A ruined tie, no coat, and a single shoe caked into grime. He spoke of a life that sounded like a fever dream, referring to himself as 42. He claimed he had spent days without sleep in the wilderness, maintaining a cold, lethal composure. "I haven't killed a single soul who has seen me," he whispered. "If I didn't have a sense of humor, I'd be dead." He spoke of money with a strange detached wisdom, calling it a tool that cannot buy time or the return of life. Suddenly he pressed a wad of $100 bills into my hand. "At least $1,000. "Take it," he insisted. When I asked if he was dying, he smiled. "Half dead. I still have one shoe on." I guided him out of the alley toward Pennsylvania Street. He claimed he lived near Capitol Hill but didn't want to go home. He wanted to walk. I watched him limp into the darkness, a man with one shoe and a head full of shadows. 20 minutes later, a woman in a heavy black coat approached me. She smelled of expensive perfume and carried a Festival of Books bag. She showed me a headshot on her phone. The same man, clean-cut and grinning. "I'm his partner," she said, her voice sharp with a mix of anxiety and irritation. "Professional partner. He's missing." "He seemed fine to me," I said, my hand tightening around the cash in my pocket. She grew suspicious, demanding I remove my hand from my pocket. I refused. She stared at me for a long moment before turning on her heel and disappeared toward the city lights. I stood alone on Colfax, the weight of the stranger's money in my hand and the echo of his static voice in my head, hoping she would never find him. Story number 2. Delta Team had occupied the deep woods for 19 days. Their mission, silence and surveillance. Despite over 2 weeks of reconnaissance, the team had observed nothing, yet the command structure kept them anchored in the darkness. The unit consisted of 6 specialists: Granger, the commander; Keeper, assistant commander; Quack, the medic; Bag, operations; Aged, weapons and minor communications. As the sun dipped below the horizon on their 17th day, the long-standing stillness finally broke. Frustrated by the lack of activity, Minor questioned their purpose. Granger finally humored him with the grim history of the site. A month prior, Zulu team, 4 of the military's finest, had been sent to investigate a classified anomaly. They returned 46 hours later, shaken and refusing to re-enter the woods. 5 days later, they were sent back in. No one had heard from them since. Keeper added a chilling detail. Before their disappearance, Zulu team reported finding a shrine constructed of bone, viscera, and human remains. Higher command suspected a cult or a rogue black site experiment, but the reality remained obscured. A crashing sound disrupted the briefing. A young woman stumbled into their perimeter, visibly lost and distressed as nightfall approached. Against Granger's standing orders to remain undetected, Keeper used a camera to document her. The shutter click caught her attention, but she failed to spot the camouflage team. After a brief tense moment, with her flashlight she moved north. Driven by a collective sense of duty, Delta team shadowed her. For over 30 minutes they trailed her through the brush, eventually arriving at a gruesome discovery, a makeshift campsite that Senior described as hellish, featuring a tarp, chains, and a dying fire. The woman approached the site cautiously. Suddenly, a deep, raspy voice echoed through the trees, a voice that sounded chemically altered or inhuman. "Shh! He hath provided, lover. Do it now." A silhouette lunged from the darkness, attacking the woman. Through their night vision goggles, the team saw the struggle, but strangely the attacker registered no heat signature. Before Granger could issue a command, Keeper took a knee and fired a single fatal shot from his Bergara B-14. The team revealed themselves to the terrified survivor. As Quack confirmed the attacker was dead, Granger immediately enforced a cover story. When the woman insisted she heard a human voice and saw a man, Granger was unwavering. "It was a bear. We took it out. This is a classified training exercise." They escorted her back to the trailhead in silence. Before she drove away, Keeper warned her that no one would believe her story anyway. Once the civilian was clear, Delta team sprinted back to the campsite. Standing over the body, the grim truth surfaced. The attacker was not a bear, nor a cultist. His identification was that he was a deceased, missing member of Zulu team. The body was covered in a thick tar-like substance. Despite being recently alive and moving, the body emitted 0 heat signature on NVGs. Granger ordered the team to mark the location and call in the cleaners. Their mission was no longer just recon. It was a wait for whatever had turned their own into something unrecognizable. Next story. Caleb caught the stray right before it reached the threshold of the hangar. The creature yelled and fought, its claws finding purchase in his forearms, but Caleb held fast. He sensed the wrongness of the air, a heavy, sulphurous chill that suggested they had crossed a line they could never uncross. When he turned to retreat, the portal had vanished. The solid oak door of the manor was gone, replaced by a suffocating mist of the Blackwater Bayou. With no phone and his senses still dulled by the evening's gin, Caleb moved toward the only structure in the wasteland, a monolithic hangar draped in fog. A single rhythmic spotlight swept the marsh, though no human hand seemed to guide it. Inside, the shadows stretched toward a massive, triangular craft, matte black and predatory. It lacked the rivets of a plane. It looked grown rather than built. Beneath the belly of the craft, two men stood in obsidian suits. One was bald, with a silver beard, the other had graying hair and eyes like shattered glass. The shadows grew inhumanely long against the corrugated steel walls. The tinkling bell on the cat's collar betrayed Caleb's position. The men turned with practiced lethality. "Identify yourself," the bearded man barked, leveling a pistol at Caleb's chest. "How did you infiltrate this sector?" the gray-haired man asked. His tone was deceptively calm, but his gaze promised a shallow grave in the swamp. A familiar voice cut through the damp heat from behind. "The cat got your tongue?" Elias stepped from the gloom, his suit ruined by mire, his expression a mask of cold fury. The tension shifted instantly. The gray-haired operative addressed Elias as Proctor 29, accusing him of violating protocol. Elias countered with a silent threat, revealing a heavy weapon holstered beneath his jacket. The operative didn't carry just any weapon, they carried secrets. "You know it's not dead, 29, the gray-haired man whispered, a cruel smile touching his lips. "What happened at the Shadow Reach only alerted the Mary. You didn't stop the force. You just invited them in." Elias flinched, a rare crack in his armor. The men vanished into the mist, leaving behind a warning that Elias's own brother Julian was hiding the true scale of the failure. Caleb followed Elias back through the marsh. As they reached a patch of empty air, Elias produced a jagged iron key. A rusted door materialized from nothing, shimmering like a heat haze before becoming solid. "First law," Elias muttered, his voice hollow. "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." They stepped back into the silent master bedroom of the city apartment. The smell of ozone lingered, quickly replaced by the mundane scent of simmering spices. In the living room, Lena awaited them, her relief at the cat's return quickly soured by Elias's icy detachment. In the kitchen, Julian stirred a pot of food, wearing a brightly patterned apron, a jarring contrast to the glow-tipped bullets Elias began unloading onto the table. The atmosphere was toxic. Elias, haunted by the memory of a woman named Dr. Sterling, walked out into the night without a word, leaving his phone and weapon behind. Lena's realization that Elias mourned another woman sent her fleeing into the darkness of the hallway, the sound of her slamming door echoing like a gunshot. Left alone at the table, Caleb picked up one of the strange cartridges, watching the iridescent light swirl within the brass casing. He looked at Julian, who sat in heavy silence. "The men at the hangar said MK Ultra was just the beginning," Caleb said, his voice trembling. "They said the force is still coming. Do you know something Elias doesn't?" Julian dropped his spoon. The clatter against the ceramic bowl was the only sound in the room. "The abyss doesn't close," he whispered. "It just waits." Next story. First message at 2:08. "I've lost control. I must follow the shadow. The ritual works." 2 missed calls followed. Another message at 2:22. "My shadow went to bed. I see it lying there. I'm still in the doorway, but my feet are moving toward the bed against my will." The next message at 8:40. "I have no shadow. It is gone. Call me." Next message, 9:09. "It was waiting in the shower. It left when I entered, but I couldn't follow. Now it is in the kitchen. I think it is preparing food." 9:20. "You should try this. It is magnificent." 9:28. "I did not write that last message. I'm sending these against my will. Do not do this. Help me." 9:30. "I left the house. I threw my phone on the table. Please." I could not reach him until that evening. He sounded normal, claiming the morning messages were a pre-April Fool's prank. Yet his voice possessed an erratic quality, cracking as if he were fighting to finish his own sentences. On Sunday, silence. Then, on the 1st of April, a barrage of identical invitations arrived. "Come over. I can show you how to travel through time." Julian called at 11:06, his voice a repetitive loop. He sounded disappointed, almost hostile, when I declined due to previous plans. Throughout the evening, he sent the same invitation 4 more times. By nightfall, his voicemails had evolved into a hoarse rhythmic chanting of the invitation. The final message ended with a solitary piercing scream for help before the line went dead. I drove to his residence the next day. The house looked abandoned. Curtains were drawn tight, and his car sat haphazardly on the lawn. Before I could exit my vehicle, Julian sprinted from the house, a wide, vacant grin stretched across his pale face. He dragged me inside. The living room smelled of acrid, burnt plastic. The furniture had been shoved against the walls. A single floor lamp cast a harsh light over plastic sheets spread across the floor. "Stay still," Julian whispered, kneeling to trace my shadow with a grayish powder. "I will show you." As he moved with unnatural speed, I noticed two things. He was using his left hand, though he had always been right-handed, and Julian cast no shadow of his own. I recoiled. His grin vanished. "You have to travel," he shrieked. I fled for the door with Julian in pursuit. I scrambled into my car and locked the doors just as he reached the handle. Outside, he threw powder onto the pavement and struck a match. As I sped away, I realized he hadn't aimed for the car. He had ignited the powder directly over the car's shadow. I have blocked his accounts, but the silence did not last. Late last night, I received a message from Sarah, our chemist friend. Since then, 30 more have arrived, all identical. Come over. I can show you how to travel through time. Next story. Wild predators often employ deception to secure their prey. A solitary hunter might approach a domestic animal mirroring friendly gestures, ears forward, tail raised, to mimic a submissive playmate. This charade draws the victim deeper into the wilderness, away from safety. Only then does the rest of the pack emerge from the shadows. The friend reveals its true nature as the trap snaps shut. Society often views a child's bond with an imaginary companion as a harmless phase of development. Experts consider the behavior benign, provided the child maintains a grasp on reality. However, I often ponder the hidden statistics. I wonder how many disappearances or tragedies correlate with the presence of these unseen entities, and specifically the age at which a person stops seeing them. My first companion was named Leo. He appeared to be a few years older than I was. We spent our afternoons on the banks of a great northern lake constructing fortresses in the sand and collecting smooth stones. Leo possessed an unnatural affinity for the deep water. He frequently paddled far beyond the shelf, giggling as he urged me to follow. My mother's sharp voice always pulled me back before the water reached my chest. It took years for me to realize that she never saw a second boy on those shores. She only saw me talking to the wind. Folklore across the globe warns of spirits that imitate the voices of loved ones to lure the unwary from their villages. These stories served a vital purpose. Survival belonged to those who did not follow strange sounds into the dark. When we moved to a rural estate surrounded by dense timber, I met Ilara. She appeared only when I was alone. She was unsettling. Her bare feet were perpetually stained with earth, and her wide eyes remained glassy and fixed. She wore a tattered floral dress and pointed toward a cabin deep in the woods where she claimed her family lived. Ilara grew insistent during the winter months. Despite the sub-zero temperature, she wore no coat and claimed the cold was an illusion. "If you stay in the snow long enough," she whispered, "you stop feeling it." I sensed a predatory edge to her loneliness and never stepped beyond the yard's perimeter. Ancient myths speak of sirens, creatures that assume the form of one's deepest desires. Their song bewitches a listener, leading them toward a jagged end. At 13, we moved to a towering apartment complex on the outskirts of a decaying industrial city. There I met Marcus. He was 15, charismatic, and claimed to live in the basement. We spent our nights on the roof, sharing stolen cigarettes under the stars. My affection for him blinded me to the truth until I watched him fall 9 stories into a steel bin, only to stand up and brush off his clothes without a single bruise. When Marcus finally urged me to step off the edge so we could remain together forever, terror finally overrode my devotion. I refused, and he vanished into the night. Legends of skinwalkers and shapeshifters exist because of a primal memory, the fear of being harmed by something that wears a familiar face. Years later, while living in a quiet trailer park, I watched my young cousin, Maya, play with a neighbor girl named Chloe. One afternoon, a heavy truck thundered down the road, striking Chloe with full force. I braced for the horror, but Chloe simply stood up, skipped off the pavement, and whispered into Maya's ear. In that moment, my childhood whimsy died, replaced by a cold adult suspicion. I saw Chloe clearly for the first time. Her teeth were far too sharp, and her fingernails resembled talons. When I confronted her, she didn't deny her nature. She merely smiled a predatory, ancient smile. I forced Maya inside and kept her there until the entity finally retreated from our lives. The anglerfish thrives in total darkness, using a single lure of light to promise salvation to the desperate. Those who take the bait meet a grisly end. I still see these entities today. They appear as elderly women needing help across a lethal intersection, or charismatic strangers urging one more drink at a bar. Perhaps I possess a rare genetic trait, a survival mechanism that never deactivated. I'm a sentry against the unknown. Watch your children closely when they speak of new invisible friends. Do not assume they are alone in their rooms. The most dangerous predators do not growl. They invite you to play. Next story. My brother possesses a cold, calculating mind, the kind the world labels a psychopath. He is 2 years younger than I, but he has never been an ordinary teenager. While I have sensed his detachment for years, the final confirmation arrived last winter. If he ever discovers I have shared this, he would likely end me. I say this as a joke, yet the truth remains. Not all those with his condition are violent, but almost all are brilliant and entirely devoid of remorse. He will not weep at my funeral, just as he didn't shed a tear for our grandfather. He simply has different goals. Where some seek power or profit, my brother seeks the thrill of the hunt. He understands my need to speak. He just cannot feel the weight of my fear. That night, I saw him truly joyful for the first time. He was ecstatic, while I was paralyzed. He knows I will not go to the authorities. I barely want to acknowledge the memory myself. We live in a quiet, hilly suburb near a massive waterfall. Most residents commute to the city via a single winding road flanked by dense forest. In the center, the pavement narrows significantly. I work evenings at a restaurant in the city, and every night before I leave, my father checks my bag for defense spray. He was a high-ranking officer once, but a specific horrific case, one that proved humans can be more monstrous than any fiction, forced him into early retirement. In late 2015, neighbors began to vanish. Cars were found abandoned in the woods, yet the police found no traces of a struggle. The disappearances continued despite increased patrols. The truth would have remained buried if not for the events of December 23rd. I finished my shift late that evening. My brother unexpectedly arrived at my workplace, claiming he wanted to ride home with me. It was uncharacteristic. He never sought my company. As we began the drive, my phone battery died. The road was silent and dark. When we reached the narrowest pass, I saw a couple on the shoulder, gesturing for a ride. Despite my brother's warning to keep driving, I stopped. I recognized the man. I had seen him at the station before. He was an officer. I assumed his presence meant absolute safety. I was wrong. You never realize the danger when it wears uniform. You are taught to trust. Once we reached the deepest part of the woods, the monsters woke up. A cold blade pressed against my throat. The officer, Elias, smiled. His partner, Julian, held a knife to my brother in the back seat. They forced me to drive toward the waterfalls. At the edge of the cliffs, they dragged us out. I was terrified, shivering as Julian began to harass me. We were outnumbered and defenseless. Then my brother, nature, took over. "You're going to kill us anyway," he said with a chilling calm. "Why not have some fun first?" He moved toward me, whispering for me to play along. I saw his eyes. They were empty, like a void. As the two men laughed, a soft whizzing sound cut through the air. Elias collapsed, clutching his leg. A masked figure emerged from the tree line, wielding a silenced rifle. Another shot rang out, and Julian fell beside his partner. My brother didn't flinch. He walked to the masked figure, and they shook hands. My brother took a secondary weapon from the stranger's coat and systematically incapacitated the two men further. They were silenced with tape and bound to a tree. The masked figure recorded a distorted confession. The two men had been using their relationship and Elias's credentials to lure victims. They raped, murdered, and disposed of bodies over the falls, weighted with stones. When the confession ended, my brother took the lead. He didn't just end them, he enjoyed the process. He laughed as he finished what the law couldn't. We left the scene spotless. My brother's accomplice vanished into the woods, and we drove home. My brother warned me to stay silent, his eyes as blank as a winter sky. Days later, the news reported the discovery of the murderers. A camera containing their full confession had been found by investigators, along with the evidence of their crimes. My brother later explained that he had been investigating the disappearance for months. He used me as bait because he knew I was gullible enough to stop for them, and he knew his team was positioned to intervene. I investigated because it was thrilling, he told me, and I finished them because I enjoyed it. He had surveyed the woods for weeks with a group of like-minded individuals, some detached like him, others driven by a dark sense of justice. He had even planned a jump into the river if the rescue failed. He continues his operation now. He left me with a single piece of advice: never assume anything based on appearances. Observe, listen, and trust only your gut. I asked him when he became so cold and mature, but looking into his hollow eyes, I realized he was simply born that way.